Nobody talks about the sides. We obsess over the Sunday roast, argue about the pudding, fight wars over gravy. But the real genius of the 1970s British kitchen lived on the edge of the plate. The little dishes. The ones that turned 2 lamb chops into a meal for 6. The ones your mum threw together from a tin, a root vegetable, and sheer bloody-mindedness. And number 9 on this list was so effective at stretching a family meal that a major frozen food company actually copied the recipe, repackaged it, and sold it back to us at 10 times the price. These are the 25 forgotten side dishes that kept Britain fed when wages were thin and mouths were many. Before we start, subscribe, because this list might just cut your weekly shop in half. Let us begin. Number 25. Bread sauce. While the rest of Europe laughed at the idea of making a sauce from stale bread, British housewives knew something the French never understood. That a handful of breadcrumbs simmered in milk with a studded onion and a bay leaf created something velvety, fragrant, and utterly unlike anything else on the table. Your mum would take the heel ends nobody wanted, tear them into a saucepan of warm milk, and let the whole thing sit on the lowest heat for 20 minutes. The onion, stabbed with 4 or 5 cloves and dropped in whole, gave off a gentle spiced warmth that perfumed the entire kitchen. A knob of butter stirred in at the end made it glossy. Bread sauce appeared beside the Christmas turkey and the Sunday chicken, spooned from a small jug that had been in the family since before anyone could remember. The cost was practically nothing. Stale bread that would have gone to the birds, a splash of milk, 1 onion. Yet it lifted roast poultry into something ceremonial. Supermarkets eventually sold it in jars for 30 pence, tasting of flour paste and disappointment. Nobody who grew up with the real thing was fooled for a second. Number 24. Mushy peas from dried marrow fat. Not the bright green slop from a tin. Your mum's mushy peas started the night before when she measured out a mug of dried marrow fat peas and left them soaking in cold water with a bicarbonate of soda tablet. By morning they had swelled to twice their size, pale and bloated. She would drain them, cover them with fresh water, and simmer until they collapsed into a thick, khaki-colored mush that tasted nothing like they looked. A pinch of sugar, a knob of butter, salt, white pepper. Stirred hard with a wooden spoon until some peas were smooth and others still held their shape. The texture was the point. Half creamy, half chunky. Served in a bowl beside fish and chips on Friday, beside a pork chop on Wednesday. A bag of dried marrow fat peas cost about 5 pence in 1974 and made enough for a week. When bachelors started selling tinned mushy peas, convenience won, but the flavor lost. Number 23. Pickled beetroot. Jars of it lined every larder shelf. Your mum would boil whole beetroots until tender, slip off the skins under cold water, slice them into thick rounds, and pack them into old coffee jars filled with malt vinegar, sugar, and a few peppercorns. The vinegar turned shocking purple within hours, staining everything it touched. Those slices appeared beside cold cuts on Monday, in sandwiches on Tuesday, and chopped into salads for the rest of the week. Growing your own beetroot was common on allotments, so the cost was the price of vinegar and nothing more. There was always a jar open in the fridge door, waiting. Pickled beetroot was the silent workhorse of the 1970s cold supper, making a plate of ham and bread look like a proper meal. Shop-bought versions now taste of acetic acid and sadness. The real thing, made with fresh beets and proper malt vinegar, was a different food entirely. Number 22. Cauliflower cheese. This was not a side dish in the polite sense. In most homes, cauliflower cheese was the meal. A whole head of cauliflower, broken into florets and boiled until just tender, smothered in a thick white sauce made from butter, flour, milk, and a fistful of strong cheddar. Your mum grated the cheese on that box grater, the one that took the skin off her knuckles twice a month, and stirred it into the bubbling roux until it turned golden and stringy. Poured over the cauliflower in a Pyrex dish, topped with more cheese and a scattering of breadcrumbs, then grilled until the top blistered brown and the sauce bubbled at the edges. The smell brought everyone to the kitchen. A whole cauliflower cost about 8 pence in 1975. The cheese and butter brought the total to maybe 20 pence. It fed 4 easily, 5 if you served it with crusty bread to mop up the sauce. Some families had cauliflower cheese every Thursday without fail. It was dependable, cheap, and no child could argue with melted cheese. The day we started buying it, frozen in plastic trays, was the day something honest died in the British kitchen. Number 21. Champ. Over from Northern Ireland came this beautiful, brutal mash of floury potatoes and spring onions. Your mum would boil potatoes until they fell apart, then mash them with hot milk, a lump of butter the size of an egg, and a generous handful of chopped spring onions that had been softened in that same butter. The onions kept a slight bite, little green flecks running through the white potato like veins of flavor. Served in a mound with a well of melted butter pooling in the center, Champ turned a plate of sausages into something worth sitting down for. Potatoes cost almost nothing. Spring onions were a few pence for a bunch. The butter was the luxury, and even that was only a couple of ounces. Champ was comfort that cost pennies. It vanished not because anyone disliked it, but because instant mash promised the same result in 30 seconds. It did not deliver. Number 20. Parsley sauce. That pale green sauce, speckled with dark flecks of chopped parsley, sat in a jug beside boiled gammon, poached fish, or broad beans in every kitchen in the country. Your mum made it from a basic white sauce, butter, flour, milk, then stirred in a massive handful of freshly chopped parsley at the last moment. The parsley had to be fresh, not dried. Dried parsley tasted of hay. Fresh parsley, chopped fine on a wooden board until the knife was stained green, gave the sauce a bright, almost peppery flavor that cut through fatty meat beautifully. A bunch of parsley cost about 3 pence from the greengrocer. The sauce took 5 minutes, yet it transformed a plain piece of boiled bacon into something your dad would talk about. Parsley sauce disappeared when packet sauces arrived, promising the same thing with half the effort. But the packet version tasted of corn flour and artificial coloring. The real thing was alive with flavor. We traded 5 minutes of stirring for something measurably worse. Number 19. Bubble and squeak patties. Everyone knows bubble and squeak as leftover vegetables fried in a pan. But the 1970s patty version was something else entirely. Your mum would take cold mashed potato, mix in chopped leftover cabbage, swede, carrot, whatever was left from Sunday, bind it with a beaten egg, then shape it into thick rounds and shallow fry in dripping until each side was dark and crackling. The outside shattered when you cut it. The inside was soft, savory, faintly sweet from the root vegetables. Served beside cold meat or a fried egg, these patties turned leftovers into something children actually asked for. The cost was zero, since everything in them had already been paid for and eaten once. The egg was the only new ingredient. Bubble and squeak patties were the ultimate expression of the 1970s kitchen philosophy. Nothing wasted, everything improved. You cannot buy this in any shop. You never could. Number 18. Piccalilli. That violent yellow relish, chunky with cauliflower florets, silver skin onions and cubes of marrow, appeared at every cold table, buffet and ploughman's lunch in Britain. Your mum made it in autumn when the garden produced more vegetables than anyone could eat fresh. She would salt the vegetables overnight to draw out moisture, then simmer them briefly in a sharp sauce of vinegar, mustard powder, turmeric and corn flour. The result was crunchy, tangy, and so yellow it looked radioactive. Spooned beside a slice of pork pie or a wedge of cheddar, Piccalilli made simple food exciting. A batch cost almost nothing to make and lasted months in sterilized jars. The Branston version that took over the shelves was sweeter, softer, and less interesting in every way. Homemade Piccalilli had bite, it had texture, it had personality, and it used up vegetables that would otherwise have rotted on the compost heap. Number 17. Braised red cabbage. Your mum would shred half a red cabbage, fry it gently with sliced onion and a chopped cooking apple, then add a splash of vinegar, a spoonful of brown sugar, and a few cloves. The lid went on and it simmered for an hour, the kitchen filling with a sweet, sharp, almost Christmassy aroma. The cabbage turned from purple to deep burgundy, soft and glossy, each strand tangled with melting apple and caramelized onion. Served beside pork chops, sausages, or the Christmas goose, braised red cabbage added color and richness that no other side could match. A red cabbage cost about 6p. The apple came from the tree in the garden. The whole dish served 6 for almost nothing. It reheated beautifully, often tasting better the second day. This was a side dish that improved everything it sat beside. We stopped making it when we stopped having time. Number 16. Fried bread. Not a side dish in the traditional sense, but in the 1970s, fried bread appeared beside everything. Your mum would cut thick slices of white bread, maybe 2 days old and slightly stale, and fry them in the fat left in the pan from whatever came before. Bacon fat, sausage fat, dripping, lard. The bread soaked it up like a sponge, turning golden and crisp on the outside while staying soft and rich in the center. Served beside a full fry-up, beside baked beans, beside a bowl of soup as a dunking vehicle. The cost was a slice of bread and fat that was already in the pan. Essentially free. Fried bread was the 1970s answer to a question nobody asked, but everyone needed answered. How do you make a small meal feel enormous? You add fried bread. Nutritionists called it a cardiac event on a plate. Children called it the best bit. Number 15. Peas pudding. Boiled in a cloth alongside the ham joint, peas pudding was the golden, earthy companion to every boiled bacon supper north of Watford. Your mum tied dried yellow split peas in a muslin cloth, dropped it into the pot with the simmering bacon, and let it cook for hours until the peas turned to a smooth, buttery paste flavored with the smoky pork liquor. Untied from the cloth, it held its shape in a golden dome. Sliced or spooned beside the ham, spread on bread the next day, or fried in slices for breakfast. A pound of split peas cost 4p. The ham did double duty, flavoring both the meat and the pudding. Nothing was wasted, and 2 dishes emerged from one pot. Peas pudding was a masterclass in economy. When boiled bacon suppers faded, peas pudding went with them, remembered now only in the northeast and in the nursery rhyme that outlasted the recipe. Number 14. Creamed leeks. Your mum would slice leeks into thick rounds, wash the grit out under the cold tap, and simmer them in just enough water to cover. When soft, she drained them and stirred in a knob of butter and a generous splash of cream or top of the milk. Salt, white pepper, a scrape of nutmeg. The leeks turned silky and sweet, nothing like the tough, fibrous things they started as. Served beside lamb chops or roast chicken, creamed leeks were an elegant side that cost almost nothing. Leeks were among the cheapest vegetables at the greengrocer. A bunch cost maybe 5p in 1976. Yet this simple dish made a weeknight supper feel special. Nobody makes creamed leeks now. It takes 10 minutes and costs less than £1. But we will happily spend £3 on a bag of pre-prepared stir-fry vegetables and call it progress. Number 13. Mint sauce from scratch. Not the lurid green jelly from a jar. Your mum grew mint in a pot by the back door, or it grew itself in the garden border, because mint does whatever it pleases. She would strip the leaves, chop them fine on a board, then put them in a jug with a teaspoon of sugar and a splash of boiling water to dissolve it. Once cooled, she added malt vinegar until the sauce was sharp and fresh, the mint releasing its oils into the liquid until the kitchen smelled of summer. Poured over lamb from a small china jug, this mint sauce was alive with flavor. Bright, punchy, nothing like the sticky bottled version that tastes of sugar and food coloring. The cost was a handful of free mint and a splash of vinegar. Penny for penny, it was the most effective side dish in the entire British kitchen. The bottled version killed it. Convenience won again. But anyone who has tasted real mint sauce beside a leg of lamb knows exactly what we surrendered. Number 12. Cheese and onion pie as a side. In the north, cheese and onion pie was not always the main event. Sliced thin and served cold beside salads, cold meats or pickles, a single pie stretched across 3 or 4 meals. Your mum would make a short crust pastry case, Fill it with sliced onions softened in butter and mixed with crumbled Lancashire cheese. Then bake until the top was golden and the filling set like a savoury custard. A whole pie cost maybe 15 pence to make and served the family all week in different rolls. Hot on Monday with beans, cold on Tuesday with pickle, sliced thin on Wednesday beside a bowl of soup. It was the most versatile cheap food in the northern larder. Supermarkets sell cheese and onion slices now for £1 each. Your mum made the entire pie for less. Number 11. Colcannon. From Irish kitchens into British homes, colcannon brought mashed potato to life with shredded cabbage or kale, fried in butter until just wilting. Then folded through the mash with more butter and a splash of hot milk. The cabbage gave little pops of green through the white potato, each bite slightly different. A well of butter melted in the top. That was the rule. If the butter was not pooling golden in the center, you had not made it right. Colcannon appeared beside stews, beside chops, beside anything that needed something hearty and warm on the plate. It cost the same as plain mash, maybe 2 pence more for the cabbage. When frozen chips arrived in the late 1970s, handmade potato sides like colcannon could not compete. Flavor was never the issue. Time was. Number 10. Onion gravy. Not packet gravy, not granules. Your mum's onion gravy started with 3 large onions, sliced thin and fried slowly in dripping until they were dark brown and sweet, maybe 20 minutes over a low heat. Then she added a tablespoon of flour, stirred it in, and poured over the vegetable water she had saved from boiling the carrots and potatoes. Maybe a splash of Worcestershire sauce, maybe half an OXO cube crumbled in, simmered until thick enough to coat the back of a spoon. This gravy was a side dish in its own right, poured over sausages, over mash, over Yorkshire puddings. It elevated everything. The onions cost about 3 pence. The flour was already in the cupboard. The vegetable water was free. Yet this gravy tasted richer and deeper than anything a packet could produce. We abandoned it for Bisto granules in the 1980s because stirring for 20 minutes felt like too much to ask. The gravy got worse. Nobody seemed to notice. Number 9. Savoury rice. Before Uncle Ben's boil in the bag arrived, your mum made savoury rice by frying a chopped onion, stirring in a mug of long grain rice, and adding 2 mugs of stock made from a chicken OXO cube. A handful of frozen peas went in near the end. Maybe a pinch of turmeric for colour. The rice absorbed the stock as it cooked, each grain flavoured through. Served beside a grilled chop or a piece of fish, savoury rice turned a Spartan plate into something that felt almost exotic by 1970s standards. Rice cost about 4 pence a pound. An OXO cube and a few frozen peas brought the total to well under 10 pence for a side that served 4. This is the recipe a frozen food company repackaged as pilau rice, sold in a plastic tray for 40 pence, and convinced a generation they could not cook rice themselves. Your mum could, and hers tasted better. Number 8. Mashed swede with butter. Swede was the vegetable nobody celebrated but everybody ate. Your mum peeled and cubed it, boiled it until soft, then mashed it with a disgraceful amount of butter and a grind of white pepper. The result was golden, sweet, and earthy, completely different from the watery, flavourless cubes that schools served in metal trays. Mashed swede beside a lamb shank or a plate of mince was one of the great unsung combinations of British cooking. A swede cost about 4 pence. The butter was the extravagance, but without it, there was no point. Swede and butter needed each other the way toast needs Marmite. Inseparable, essential. Mashed swede has almost entirely vanished from modern tables, not because anyone decided it was bad, but because nobody reminded us it was good. Number 7. Stuffing balls. Not the stuffing that went inside the bird. The separate balls, rolled by hand, and baked on a tray beside the roast until golden on the outside and soft within. Your mum would mix paxo sage and onion stuffing with boiling water, let it cool enough to handle, then roll it into golf ball-sized rounds. Sometimes she added a beaten egg to bind them, sometimes a handful of chopped bacon for richness. The tray went into the oven 30 minutes before the roast came out, and those balls emerged with a crust that crackled when you bit through it. Stuffing balls stretched the roast dinner without adding any real cost. A box of Paxo was about 8 pence and made enough for 12 balls. Children would eat 3 each and barely touch the meat, which was, of course, the entire point. Fewer mouths fighting over the chicken. More leftovers for Monday. Stuffing balls were a strategic weapon disguised as a side dish. Number 6. Chip shop-style curry sauce. A generation of British families learned to love curry not from Indian restaurants, but from the chip shop. Your mum replicated that thin, sweet, golden sauce at home using curry powder, a chopped onion, flour, stock, and a spoonful of mango chutney or even marmalade. Fried the onion, stirred in the curry powder and flour, added stock, simmered for 10 minutes. The result was not remotely authentic, but it was exactly what everyone wanted, poured over chips on a Saturday night. The entire batch cost about 6 pence and served the whole family. This sauce turned a plate of oven chips into an event. Chip shop curry sauce was the gateway drug to an entire nation's love affair with curry. It deserves more respect than it gets. Number 5. Roasted parsnips in dripping. Before parsnips became a fashionable restaurant garnish, they were the cheapest root vegetable at the greengrocer. Your mum peeled them, quartered them lengthways, and roasted them in beef dripping alongside the potatoes. The natural sugars caramelized in the hot fat, turning the edges dark and sticky, while the centers went soft and sweet as honey. Parsnips roasted in dripping tasted like something far more expensive than they were. A pound of parsnips cost about 3 pence in 1975. The dripping was free, saved from last week's joint. Together they created a side dish so good that some family members preferred the parsnips to the roast potatoes, which, in a 1970s British household, was close to heresy. We roast parsnips in olive oil now. It is not the same. Number 4. Pickled onions. Every autumn, your mum would buy a string bag of pickling onions from the market, sit at the kitchen table with stinging eyes, and peel every single one. They went into sterilized jars covered with spiced malt vinegar and were sealed and forgotten until Christmas. By December, those onions had turned translucent and sharp, crunchy enough to pop between your teeth, with a vinegar tang that cut through cold meats, pork pies, and cheese like nothing else could. A jar of homemade pickled onions sat on every Boxing Day table. They cost almost nothing to make, a few pence for the onions and the vinegar. Yet they elevated a cold buffet into a proper spread. The shop-bought versions are softer, sweeter, and entirely without character. Making pickled onions was a ritual. When your mum stopped doing it, nobody picked it up again. Number 3. Carrots and swede mash. 2 of the cheapest vegetables in Britain boiled together and mashed into one golden, sweet, peppery side that appeared beside everything from bangers to lamb. Your mum would peel and cube equal amounts of carrot and swede, boil them in the same pot until soft, then drain and mash with butter, salt, and white pepper. The carrot sweetened the swede. The swede gave the carrot body. Together, they were better than either alone. This was the side dish that fed families through the 3-day week, through power cuts, through every economic crisis the 1970s could throw at a household. A carrot and a swede. Maybe 6 pence total, enough to fill a serving bowl for 6. We buy pre-prepared root vegetable mash in plastic tubs now for £2.50. It takes 12 minutes to make from scratch. 12 minutes. Number 2. Yorkshire puddings as a side. In Yorkshire itself, the pudding was traditionally served before the meat, with gravy, as a way of filling stomachs so less expensive beef was needed. Your mum would make a batter of flour, eggs, and milk. Let it rest while the oven heated a muffin tin with a teaspoon of dripping in each well until the fat was smoking. Then she would pour the batter in fast and shut the door. 20 minutes later, 12 golden risen puddings sat cooling on a wire rack, crisp on the outside, hollow and soft within. The cost was flour, 1 egg, and a splash of milk. Maybe 4 pence for the batch. Those puddings filled plates, soaked up gravy, and made a small roast feed a large family. The secret was the smoking hot fat and not opening the oven door. Your mum knew this. Aunt Bessie's frozen Yorkshires arrived in the 1990s, and an entire generation stopped making batter. The frozen ones are acceptable. The real ones were magnificent. Number 1. Bread and butter. The simplest side dish in British history, and the one that did more work than any other. A plate of sliced white bread, buttered, sat in the middle of every table beside every meal. Soup, stew, cold meats, fish and chips. Beans on toast already had toast, but there was still bread and butter on the table. It filled gaps. It soaked up gravy. It stretched a meal for 4 into a meal for 6, with nothing more than a loaf and a packet of Anchor. A large white loaf cost about 12 pence in 1976. A pat of butter, maybe 8 pence. For 20 pence, you had the universal British side dish, the one that appeared at breakfast, dinner and tea without question. Nobody thought of bread and butter as a recipe. It was simply the way meals worked. When meals stopped needing to stretch, the bread plate disappeared from the table, and with it went something quieter than a recipe. A whole way of feeding a family vanished, one slice at a time. Try one this week. Make the onion gravy properly with real onions fried for 20 minutes. Boil your own mushy peas from dried marrow fat. Mash some swede with a reckless amount of butter. Then come back and tell me your mum was wrong. I'll wait.